Dear friends, welcome to this short presentation. This will be a summary of my paper on the role of educational institutions in the post-COVID-19 era. I'm grateful to Master Swami for inviting me to participate in this global education conference and giving me this chance to present my paper. Education is different from teaching and training. A right kind of education should not be concerned with any ideology. However much it may be promised a future utopia, it is not based on any system, however carefully sought out, nor is it a means of conditioning the individual in some special manner. Education in the true sense is helping the individual to be mature and free, to flower greatly in love and goodness. This is what we should be interested in, and not in shaping the child according to some idealistic pattern. The highest function of education is to bring about an integrated individual who is capable of dealing with life as a whole. Enlightenment to create modern education system, however, it has been taken by contemporary society, particularly after the Industrial Revolution, regardless their differences in political system and social formations, mostly regard as an instrument to develop their countries economically or otherwise. Education thus become a national or social machine to create human resources for the advancement of their countries and societies. Human being is regarded as labor resources for a purpose to achieve someone's idea and policies. Socrates, who is considered one of the great educators and philosophers, launched a long and distinguished history of Western philosophical tradition through his battle with the sophists. The philosophy of education found its role and source from his broader philosophical agenda. According to Socrates, education is a process to cultivate, to foster characters and disposition of students with rational ability to evaluate and judge. It is not to train or to shape students for a particular ideal pattern or any utilitarian purpose. Master Swami, in his book of Education for Total Consciousness, points out that education for total consciousness is a segment of the treatise, Human Manifesto, a comprehensive exposition generating energy-based knowledge on all branches of learning intended to promote humanism and man's awareness of being one with the universe. He contends that real education aims at reaching the real realm of knowledge, untouched by doubt. He says, the world and I are not different. Everything that exists in the universe exists within me. Education aims at realizing this truth logically and scientifically. Similar to the conviction of Swami's total consciousness education, Paulo Freire, a Latin American education philosopher, has from another trajectory to stress on the liberating essence of education. He focuses his theory on ways of pedagogy and advocates a partner relationship of the teacher and students in searching for truth. He argues, liberating education consists in acts of cognition, not the transfer of information. He proposed a dialogical way of education and says, authentic education is not carried on by A for B or A about B, but rather by A with B, mediated by the word, a word which embraces the challenge and challenges both parties, giving rise to views or opinions about it. Paulo Freire considers dialogue is a way to attain his ideal education process of praxis. He proposed that education should be a practice of freedom. He explains that while the problem of humanization has always, from an archaeological point of view, been main central problem, it now takes on the characters of an inescapable concern for humanization, leads at once to the recognition of dehumanization, not only as an ontological possibility, but as an historical reality. And it contains the oppressed have internalized the image of the oppressor and adopted his guidelines, are fearful for freedom. Therefore, education to Freire, in its genuine essence and function, is liberating. He argues, education as the practice of freedom, as opposed to education as the practice of domination, denies that man is abstract, isolated, independent, and unattended to the world. It also denies that the world exists as reality apart from man. Therefore, authentic reflection considers neither abstract man nor the world without man, but men in their relation with the world. He then quotes Sartre and concludes, consciousness neither precedes the world nor follows it. This recognition of consciousness and nature of authentic reflection has impelled Freire to identify two existing opposite education method, one of which is the banking concept, which is based on the assumption of a dichotomy between man and the world. Man is merely in the world, not with the world or with others. Man is spectator, not recreator. He says, in this view, man is not a conscious being. He is rather the possessor of a consciousness, an empty mind passively open to the reception of deposits of reality from the world outside. And he considered this banking concept of education is inevitably leading to oppressive education, because banking education begins with a false understanding of men as objects. It cannot promote the development of what from cause biophilia, but instead produce its opposite, necrophilia. Another method is the problem-posing method, which does not dichotomize the activity of the teacher-student. The role of the problem-posing education is to create, together with the students, the condition under which knowledge at the level of doxa is superset by true knowledge at the level of the logos. Put this into the education function as concern, whereas banking education anesthetized and inhibits creative power. Problem-posing education involves a constant unveiling of reality. The former attempts to maintain the submersion of consciousness. The latter strive for the emergence of consciousness and critical intervention in reality. Thus, liberating education resists against oppressive education. The role of educational institution can only be understood with these educational philosophies in mind. Institution is a carrier of mission. In order to implement the education activity and to attain its excellence, the career institution has an imperative role behind the scene. According to Samuel Huntington, institutions are stable, valued, recurring patterns of behavior. Institution can also refer to mechanisms which govern the behavior of a set of individuals within a given community. Moreover, institutions are identified with a social purpose, transcending individuals and intention by mediating the rules that govern living behaviors. According to Jeffrey Hodgson, it is misleading to say that an institution is a form of behavior. Instead, Hodgson states that institutions are integrated systems of rules that structure social interactions. In another word, institution besides its visible building, campus, and facility is also a system that's shaping the behavior pattern. Modern universities of higher education have been stressed on three dimensions of their institutional supports to the education system, namely generation of knowledge, that is research, spreading of knowledge, that is teaching, and implementation of knowledge, that is service. The faculty promotion evaluation and most higher education accreditation guidelines and indicators are organized according to these items for the evaluation of educational program and institutional performance, and as well the performance of a faculty qualification. The financial input and hardware, software constructions are all invested based on these orientations. However, constrained by the traditional Western departmentalized education system, these functions of education are also divided and mostly even isolated. In most of the cases, spreading the knowledge, teaching, which Freire insists to be transformed from banking concept to a dialogical problem-posing method, is not only rarely considered as a counterparty of research. Instead, it has been taken as an extension of research. Knowledge created by the teacher or researchers has been taken as an objective capital to be deposited to the students. Meanwhile, the role of service action, which is regarded as an essential part of the educational philosophy of practice. Practice means a cycle practice of reflection upon action and action upon reflection. Is named here as simply an implementation of knowledge. It is thus a true hermeneutic circle of process education is far from being carried by modern education system, not to say the achievement of total consciousness education suggested by Master Swami. A qualified education institution to support a total consciousness education or a liberating education, therefore should focus not only on its material financial inputs and its visible structures, but more significantly on its philosophical system of education and its pedagogical methods. Master Swami is rightly commenting on the educational institution by saying, the basic requirement of an educational institution is the appropriate atmosphere to acquire and impart knowledge scientifically and logically. It is not a factory to produce objects, but an abode of excellence where the individual is shaped and molded to become an ideal human being. Thus, the following steps are imperative to be taken by any institution if a true liberating education is to be carried. 1. Conceptual clarification of the education from training or learning in order to shape education activity on a genuine and authentic direction. 2. To distinguish general education institution from professional training institutions and adequately define their roles and connections to preserve the true education be exist and be minded. 3. A radical transformation be made for the curricula of education program so that it will not be just a knowledge-based education, but holistic and liberating oriented. 4th, atmosphere of freedom and culture of liberty need to be cultivated in the campus and education circumstance. 5, pedagogical reorientation for the teachers and educational administrators. 6, sufficient input be invested to the education. The eruption of the COVID-19 pandemic at the end of the year 2019 has overwhelmingly affected the existing education system and practices worldwide. Among many other epidemic prevention strategies, the quarantine policy exercise to prevent the infection has interrupted normal social interactions. And face masks wearing universally has a symbolic significance of psychological resistance to the human relationship. In many countries, the sudden lockdown without warning has caused tremendous fear and rage. The psychological collapse about human relationship can be regarded as a cardinal obstacle of genuine education. Schools are shut down. Learning processes are disrupted. It is though the vaccines are gradually developed and almost ready to be taken by many country citizens. We can expect that our world in the coming whole new year of 2021 will be continue living in the midst of the struggling with the virus. Not to say the prediction from many biologists and medical experts that new infectious virus and their metamorphic genes will be continually emerging. The abnormal life under pandemic stress is seemingly to become normal, at the least a new normal. One of the phenomena of abnormal to become and even embraced as a new normal is the virtual way of education. High technology were and are introduced into education field as teaching instruments and administrative support along the way as it developing. Nevertheless, they were so far considered and welcome as but a supplementary. Too much dependent on high-tech on education has a connotation of to reduce the personal interactions between teachers and students, and in some cases also affecting community relation of a class, that is mutual learning of the fellow classmate. There were all the time voices of objection and resistance in educational communities to alert the overuse of the high-tech, interrupting pedagogy process. COVID-19 has forced the education system to appreciate the internet contributions during the country lockdown and school shutdown situation. When the inside education become impossible, virtual teaching and lecturing take a lead to transform the education system. It is thus, even the UNESCO had to recommend on the use of high technology and lower technology solution based on the reliability of local power supplies, internet connectivity, and digital skill of teachers and students. UNESCO's recommendations are made in responding to a particular period of pandemic stress. It is not considered as a permanent project. Therefore, no pedagogical solution being made to mend the deficiency of virtual institution for a holistic education with total consciousness. Many researchers have been done to investigate the virtual reality technologies applied to teaching different academic disciplines as supplementary way of education. Most of these research outcomes are indicating this new technological involvement as innovative and advantageous. Even the internet online education is recommended as an opportunity to make up and enhance traditional education. There are, of course, pros and cons in both traditional way of education and online technological education. Generally speaking, internet education without a traditional classroom is not a perfect teaching model, and traditional teaching without the internet attribute cannot keep up with the times. The real future education should be a combination of tradition and the internet. After COVID-19 eruption and rapidly spreading, many schools have started so-called virtual school, offering webinar lectures and courses. Under the lockdown circumstance, high-tech instruments have become imperative alternative way to keep education activity continue. People suddenly discover the high power of internet linkage that can connect worldwide to teachers and students from different parts of the world to enrich and expanding the education substance and extents. This aspect of webinar education has a critical role in future genuine education. What concerns this writer the most is in present global education. The rapid and extensive population mobility of students has challenged to the traditional institutional education, which is restricted geographically, its context and culture of particular country. This traditional model of education institution was established to carry education for its fellow countrymen or tribal residents. There are, though many schools claim internationally, have put great endeavors to equip their institution to be internationalized with 18 foreign faculties and building overseas partner schools. Nevertheless, these are but symbolic and hard to substantially and sufficiently solve the problem of genuine education requirement. When a university is proud to claim they have students come from dozens or even over 100 countries, it is impossible to expect any school can afford to have faculties from dozens or over 100 countries to take care of those different background students. When teachers are not expertise or even do not understand the students' language, cultures, and social conditions, how can true education be carried in that institution in a limited given time? With this globalized modern education circumstance in mind, the discovery of the COVID-19 has unfolded an imagination of new form of education institution in post-COVID-19 era. The model which I call it hybrid virtual school, namely to combine different countries inside gathering with a virtual international institution to coordinate the worldwide education program, which can form international web education consortium to enhance different centers of excellence from different countries and making mobility for both faculties and students according to the demands of both individual students and national centers. With the contribution of high-tech and the concept of virtual institution that will help us to avoid the weakness of both models mentioned above and to preserve their strengths. I suppose this will be not only suitable to virus pandemic era, but favorable also permanently. Thank you.